Um, Trevor Loudon is our speaker tonight. Trevor is a New Zealand native who now lives in Florida. He cares deeply about what's happening in America because as America goes, so goes many other countries. Mr. Loudon is a filmmaker, a speaker, a blogger, author, and a political activist. A number of his books, by the way, are listed in our chat, as is his website. So please take a look at that, and you can order them through his website. And there's other resources if you need to, but go through the website. If you have to go to Amazon, do that, but check his website first. Mr. Loudon has worked against Marxism and communism in New Zealand for decades, and he is exposing how close we Americans are to that same subversion here. He's written a number of books, as I just mentioned. Some of his titles are The Enemies Within, Communist, Socialist, and Security Risks Running for U.S. President from 2020, as well as Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. He has a series of books on the enemies within. He also has a movie of the enemies within. As I said, he now lives in Florida, and we welcome you, Trevor Loudon. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks very much, Gretchen, and thanks very much for having me, ladies. I really appreciate it. Look, I'll start simply. My thesis. Well, first I'll say a little bit more why I do this. You know, like I was back in New Zealand last year, and my dad is 90, and he was telling me about World War II and how terrified they were of a Japanese invasion. And if it hadn't been for the sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers and your grandmothers and great-grandmothers who kept the home fires burning and ran the factories and farms and kept the kids in school, if it hadn't been for their sacrifice, our country would have been lost. And I wouldn't be here today. So anybody who cares about liberty has to care about America, has to be grateful to America for what America has done for freedom in the world. So we're in a revolution, and what most people don't understand is that it's being led by our leaders, specifically in the Democratic Party and a few collaborators in the Republican Party. You know, I will mention Mitch McConnell as one of those. But see how it works. Most people think that, you know, I'm sure many ladies on the call have had to get security background clearances or done background checks for government jobs or military positions, but few realize there are no background checks in the US government, in the US Congress or the US Senate. You have to have a background check to work for the CIA, but not to head the House Intelligence Committee or the Senate Intelligence Committee. And so our enemies are taking advantage of this. And they're also taking advantage of the fact that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is supposed to be protecting us from this kind of infiltration, is really hamstrung because even if its leadership was sound, they answer to the Judiciary Committee, the most powerful committee in the United States Congress. And some ladies may remember a congressman from Michigan called John Conyers. He was in Congress from 1965 to 2017. He was either the ranking Democrat or the chair of the Judiciary Committee for 40 years. John Conyers had a 50-year history with the Communist Party USA. He was a card-carrying member of Democratic Socialists of America. Those are the people leading all the pro-Hamas rallies all around America right now. And he was also a supporter of the Workers' World Party, which supports North Korea and Cuba and Iran. John Conyers was a hardcore anti-American Marxist-Leninist. In 1975, he abolished the House Un-American Activities Committee, which was one of our last lines of internal defense. He was a Marxist working for Moscow most of his career. But on the Intelligence Committee and also on that Judiciary Committee until Jim Jordan took over in the last election, thankfully, You had Judy Chu from the San Gabriel Valley. I'm sure many of you know her, a longtime supporter of the Communist Workers' Party, a militant pro-Chinese group. She basically runs the Southern California Chinese community for the Communist Party of China. She is an enemy agent par excellence. You also had a man some of you have seen on TV. He tried to impeach your president twice. That was Jerry Nadler, the head of the Judiciary Committee. Also a card-carrying member of Democratic Socialists of America, a Marxist. So here's an imaginary scenario. You know, this is what should happen. Don't get excited. Imagine one day the FBI wakes up and they think our country's in deep trouble. We've got about 100 members of the House and 40 members of the US Senate who couldn't pass a background check to drive a school bus in Orange County or anywhere else. They are the reason that Iran is about to get the nuclear bomb. They are the reason the southern borders are wide open. They are the reason that big tech can suppress the free speech of Americans. They are the reason that we're no longer energy independent and our military is being degraded before our very eyes. They are the reason our kids are being indoctrinated and perverted in schools. They are the reason that fentanyl is flooding the country and killing 80,000 kids a year. All of this is orchestrated through the CCP and its friends, and our country's being destroyed. Let's go to the Judiciary Committee, our bosses. Let's talk to Mrs. Chu and Mr. Nadler. Mrs. Chu, Mr. Nadler, we need to investigate at least 100 of your Democratic colleagues for working for enemies of America. Do you mind? And by the way, Mrs. Chu, by the way, Mr. Nadler, you're both at the top of the list. Is that all right? You know, what do you think would happen to their budget next year if they tried that one? You know, why did Hillary Clinton not get prosecuted for her servers, you know, that gave secrets to the Russians and the Chinese? Because when you get to a certain point in US politics, you're untouchable because you have the power to destroy the investigative agencies. You can destroy the FBI. You could cripple the CIA. You could cripple the NSA if you wanted to. So once you get into Congress, you're pretty much untouchable because there's no security background checks. There's no media scrutiny on the left, and the FBI doesn't dare to go after you. Now, I want to talk about a couple of Biden's cabinet secretaries. And if people want to find out about Biden's communist background, get my book, White House Reds. He has been working in the interests of Moscow since 1972, in Iran since about 1978, and China since at least 2001. It wasn't Hunter Biden that corrupted Joe. It was Joe that corrupted Hunter. He was born into a pro-Chinese crime family, a communist crime family. But I want to talk about a couple of his secretaries. Now, I understand you have quite a lot of public land in California, which I'm sure you're all allowed to farm and mine and log for the benefit of your people. I'm sure the federal government lets you do that. Well, who knows who the current Secretary of the Interior is, who controls all of that land? Most people don't, because she was a complete nobody. She was a second-term congresswoman from New Mexico, a Native American called Deb Haaland. So how did she even get in this position? Well, the first thing that Biden did when he took office was to cancel the Keystone Pipeline. 11,000 American jobs just gone like that. And that's because allegedly Native Americans were protesting in the Dakotas. But those protests were organized by a woman called Judith LeBlanc of the Native Organizers Alliance, a Caddo Indian from Oklahoma, but also a serving member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party USA, which is loyal to Xi and is loyal to Putin's Russia to this day. Now, after she'd shut down the pipeline, Judith LeBlanc went out and did major voter registration drives in the Native American reservations of Montana, of Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, and Minnesota, all states that could have gone either way, but she maximized. She even held a presidential forum in Sioux City, Iowa. You know, a Communist Party member organized all this. And as a reward for this great sterling work for Biden Harris, she was allowed to nominate her very close friend, Deb Haaland, as US Secretary of the Interior. Now, Deb Haaland was a complete unknown, so they had to mount a campaign to make her known. And they had buses, they had badges, they had Facebook pages and Twitter pages, X pages, but they also had a whole bunch of celebrity endorsements. It was Deb for Interior, and Mark Ruffalo got behind it, and Alyssa Milano, and Cher, and Sarah Silverman, and Hanoi Jane Fonda, and Gloria Steinem, all Deb for Interior, Deb for Interior. And Biden nominated her, and she was confirmed with 4 Republican Senate votes. And when I say Republican, you know what I mean. These are Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins, right? So she's now Secretary of the Interior. And what is she doing? She is closing down every single energy lease she possibly can. She has shut down uranium mining in northern Colorado. She has shut down virtually all of Alaska to energy extraction. She is shutting down energy wherever she possibly can. While Joe Biden has sold off 50% of America's strategic oil reserve, which is what we are supposed to fight a war with, including selling some of it to China, who we will be fighting the war with. And so now, while we're starved of energy and the world price is going higher, which is fueling Putin's war in Ukraine, this woman put in place by a Chinese agent is effectively starving us of oil, and Joe Biden is going cap in hand to Iran and Venezuela, 2 enemies of America, to buy oil from them because we can't produce it ourselves because we're not allowed to. Now, there's another, the US Secretary of Energy is a woman called Jennifer Granholm. If anybody's from Michigan, they'll remember her. She used to be the governor. She was the protege of a well-known Marxist in Michigan called Millie Jeffrey. She was so prominent, this Marxist, she engineered Geraldine Ferraro on the Democratic ticket, VP, back in the 80s. She was that powerful. But anyway, Jennifer Granholm has said that all US military vehicles must be electric by 2030. You know, which is never going to happen, but think of the money and resources that will be wasted trying to do this. Just huge waste. But don't worry, even if it happens, Jennifer Granholm will negotiate with the Chinese and the Russians to give our forces time out on the battlefield if their batteries run low so they can go and recharge. So don't worry, don't panic. You know, you could call it stupidity or you could call it sabotage. You know, people talk about the stupidity of the Biden administration. Look at Afghanistan, what a debacle that was. I think it was a brilliant operation. Joe Biden gave Afghanistan to China with $800 billion worth of American technology, plus the technology for producing real US military IDs, which are probably now coming back across the southern border with the hundreds and hundreds of military age Chinese operatives coming across the border each week. And they're not coming to go to Vegas, people. They're coming to commit sabotage on American soil when the attacks start. So another very interesting cabinet secretary, all of Biden's secretaries are Marxists. Buttigieg, transport, Cardona, education, even Vilsack, agriculture, has got a pro-Chinese background. But here's a beauty. The current acting Secretary of Labor is a woman called Julie Su. She was in California and she was in charge of the COVID handouts. And she made such a mess of them. It was so controversial and so corrupt that the only thing to do was to kick her upstairs and make her a cabinet secretary. So she's now acting Secretary of Labor, and the Republican Senate won't confirm her. So Joe Biden is illegally just leaving her on as acting secretary. So she won't even go through a confirmation process. So in California, you have, Julie Su was very active with the League of Revolutionary Struggle back at Stanford University in the 1980s. That's a pro-Chinese communist group. She worked very closely with two very strong California communists, Kent Wong of the UC Labor. It's a big labor organization attached to the University of California, and also a man called Stuart Kuo of the Committee of 100 and Asian Americans Advancing Justice, both former members of the Communist Workers' Party, the group that Judy Chu used to hang around with, hardcore pro-Chinese Maoists. These men used the Asian Pacific Labor Alliance, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Committee of 100 to lobby for Julie Su to become Secretary of Labor, and Biden obliged. Now, Julie Su is a Maoist, a pro-Chinese communist, and you have a wave of strikes going on in America right now. You had almost a big strike at UPS. You had a major strike at the United Auto Workers Union, which cost us $7 billion, and we'll be paying that for years. FedEx is looming, Amazon is looming, and there's also big strikes being planned for Long Beach and the warehousing in the Inland Empire. You know, Long Beach is a major hub in the supply chain. That's where everything on the West Coast comes into America. That's critical. Well, Democratic Socialists of America and other communist groups are examining the weaknesses of Long Beach and the warehousing in the Inland Empire and getting ready to do strikes and maybe sabotage on those areas. And you have Julie Su, the Secretary of Labor, as one of them. She's put in place. So you're going to have pro-Chinese communist unions ready to wreck the US economy in the next year, and Julie Su, the Secretary of Labor, will be overseeing this. And whose side do you think she will be on? So this is what I'm getting at, ladies. We are in a massive communist infiltration. Massive. The Chinese, Ratcliffe, Trump's intelligence advisor, said 3 years ago, the Chinese under the Democrats controlled so many Congress members, they could determine which legislation passed the Congress and which didn't. And you think about it from Xi Jinping's point of view. He wants to bring down America. He wants to occupy America. So do you get in a multi-billion-dollar shooting war, which a multi-billion-dollar trade war, which you might lose? Do you get in a trillion-dollar shooting war before you're ready? Or do you spend a few $1,000,000 buying up American congressmen and senators to do your dirty work for you? What would you do? That is why I write the books, Security risk senators. I give the background of Dianne Feinstein. I know she's dead now, but she's a Chinese agent for 30 years. She put China into the into the World Trade Organization, which turned them from a third-rate power into a first-rate power. You got Judy Chu is basically a communist agent. Eric Swalwell was compromised by the Chinese. Nancy Pelosi is deeply in bed with the communist movement. My House Un-American series, I got two of 6. The first one deals with Northern California. The second one deals with Southern California. And the Northern one, I go into Mike Thompson's communist background, Jared Huffman, Doris Matsui, Salud Carbajal, and Army Bearer, all in Northern California, Nancy Pelosi, of course, Barbara Lee, all in Northern, Zoe Lofgren, all Marxists. In the other book, the second book, I go into the Southern California ones, Raul Ruiz out in the Palm Desert. We all know Maxine Waters, but we don't know that Jimmy, what's his name? Jimmy Garcia is Marxist background. Mark Takano, Brad Sherman from the Malibu area, deeply in bed with Filipino communists, deeply in bed with Iranian communists. Adam Schiff, who is going on and on and on about Trump-Russia collusion, is working for years with the Committee of 100, which is Communist China's main influence operation in America, and nobody called him on it while he's serving as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He says, I support Israel, where he's working with the Muslim Political Action Committee, which is one of the most terrorist-prone Muslim groups in the country, getting money from them, being endorsed by them, but I support Israel, and nobody calls him on it. You've got 3 people standing for the US Senate to replace LaFonza Butler, who is a Marxist too, by the way. You've got Barbara Lee, Marxist, used to be a formal card-carrying communist. You've got, what's the woman from Orange County? Katie Porter, another Marxist, protege of Elizabeth Warren. And you've got Adam Schiff, who has been working with communist Chinese for years and some of the most extreme Muslim elements in the country. Right now. And who knows this stuff? You won't get it from the media. I don't think most of the Republican leadership has any idea because they never use it against these people. For 3 years, Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia, and not one person called Adam Schiff on his Chinese communist ties or his hardcore Islamist ties. Not one person. But it's not hard to find. So on the international front, we've got an issue that I think all of you ladies should be well aware of, and you probably are aware of it to some degree. Obviously, we're facing a potential World War III right now because, while Trump was in power, Xi was in his box, Putin was in his box, the mullahs were in their box, and Rocket Boy was under control. They would not dare. They wouldn't step out of their box. They didn't know what was going to happen. Well, now they've got Biden in control. Now they've got their man as the head of the US Armed Forces. So why do you think the world is now getting less stable every day? Why the Russians and the Chinese are colluding to take down the US dollar? Why we could have major war in the Middle East any day, major war in the Far East any day, an attack on South Korea or India any day. Has the world been less stable in your living memories? This is the most dangerous time because we got a whole year until we have a decent president in the White House. Do you think our enemies are going to sit back and let us rebuild? They're getting ready, and a part of that's going to be attacks across the southern border. We're going to see if we don't see terrorist attacks in America before the next election, I'll be shocked. And I think most of you ladies understand that that's very likely. The borders are open for a reason. So, but here's another thing. I think most of you will probably understand that we may get another pandemic, at some point. And so look, President Trump put tariffs on Chinese goods in May 2019. And the Xinhua news agency, the official Chinese news agency, said our response to America's aggression is to declare people's war on the United States. But nobody knew what people's war meant. People's war is a Maoist term for attacking your enemy with unconventional methods before your soldiers even march. People's war is fentanyl. People's war is controlling Hollywood and TikTok. People's war is stealing technology. People's war is bribing politicians, getting politicians to gut your military. People's war is forcing your politicians to open the borders. All of that's people's war. All of it is driven by China to weaken the United States. So, and it's also biological. I cannot prove the Chinese released the COVID when they did. It perfectly timed to attack President Trump. I think it's only about 99.99999% certain right now. But we 100% know that once it was out there, they deliberately spread it to this country. They banned internal travel in China and encouraged travel to the United States, Canada, Britain, etc. Now, President Trump was in a bind because Fauci and the Tedros of the World Health Organization told him if he didn't shut down the economy, there was going to be 2 million dead by Christmas. And can you imagine what the media would have done to President Trump if he hadn't shut it down when people started dying? People are dying because President Trump doesn't care. Can you imagine? So he shut it down. But the thing is this, Tedros is a Chinese agent. He was put in place by Communist China. He's not even a doctor. He is the former leader of Ethiopia's pro-Chinese Communist Party. Fauci's got his deep ties to China. But here's the rub. Every country in the world virtually has now signed a protocol with the World Health Organization to give them total control in the event of a new pandemic or a health emergency. And a health emergency can be guns or transphobia. It doesn't even have to be a disease. America, I believe, hasn't signed up yet, but Biden wants to do that so that if there's another pandemic, it will be controlled by the World Health Organization. Now, the World Health Organization has what they call a compliance unit, a social compliance unit, and it's run by social psychologists. And it's all about the messaging to make people comply with mandates or vaccines or quarantines or whatever. And it's run by social psychologists, and the leader is Susan Mickey from Britain. She used to run Boris Johnson's COVID response. They called her the mask Nazi because she said we might have to wear masks for the rest of our lives. She admires the Chinese model, which is masks, vaccines, and lockdowns. She is also a 50-year veteran of the British Communist Party. She was so extreme in the British Communist Party, they used to call her Stalin's nanny. If we have another pandemic, the three most powerful people in the world will be Susan Mickey of the Communist Party of Britain, Tedros of the Communist Party of Ethiopia, and Xi of the Communist Party of China. This is why elections matter, people. Now, the Chinese also have a thing called Mao also had a thing called the mass line, meaning that the Chinese Communist Party comes up with a formula and everybody must conform. During the Cultural Revolution at one point, everybody had to kill 10 flies every single day because there's too many flies. And if you only got 8, you're in trouble. Well, what did we see during COVID? There was only one response that was allowed. That was masks, vaccines, and lockdowns. It was never going to be ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or vitamin D therapy or herd immunity. And what happened to doctors if they proposed those things? What happened to media or politicians if they proposed those things? They were shut down and they were neutralized, because what we saw was 2.5 years of Chinese dictate on America. This was Chinese mass line politics enforced through the communist-controlled unions who shut down the schools and the businesses, and the communist-controlled politicians like Gavin Newsom. The worst states, the states with the worst lockdowns, were all the ones with the most Chinese control. California, Oregon, Hawaii, Washington, Michigan, Illinois, Massachusetts, New York. That's where it was worse, because that's where the Chinese controlled unions are the strongest, and that's where the politicians have taken the Chinese money. So they gave us the COVID and they managed the response, and now they're getting ready to do it all over again, only they will be even more in control next time. So we need to understand that this is not just an ordinary election. Every election they say, this is the most important election of our lives. Well, this one actually is. Because if the Democrats going to get in again, they're going to have total control over health policy, and they're going to legalize 40 million illegals and give them citizenship and voting rights. And you imagine what it's going to be like to fight against that. Well, it'd be like California all over the country. There'll be no red states left. Maybe 2 or 3, and that'll be it. So what do we do? Well, I think, bluntly, I think we're going to need some divine providence to get through this. Really, I think but I think America is a covenant nation. And I don't presume to know anybody's spiritual beliefs on this call. You may have them, you may not. You may be Christian, you may be Jewish, you may be Buddhist. I don't know. But I think we all understand we're in a battle here between good and evil. And evil thrives in cowardly when leaders are cowardly. And if we look at the book of Revelations, there's a little chapter there towards the end that gives a list of people who get cast into the pit of hell at the end of time. And there's idolaters, and there's murderers, and there's thieves, and adulterers. But the very first people on the list are the cowards. First people. Why the cowards? Because cowards have no faith. They believe in nothing beyond their own sorry little life. They don't have faith in an eternal God. They don't have faith in a just universe. They just think it's all evil and corrupt, and I might as well get my little bit of it. So in America, I believe, is a nation under God, as it says in the Pledge of Allegiance, because it was the first nation in the world that said man's rights come from God, not from government. Representative government comes out of Mosaic law. The founding fathers were all scholars of the Bible. They gave you a political system that turned Christian law into civil law. And that was that private property, the protection of the individual, the protection of the individual conscience is what made America great. So it was a covenant. God gave us this great constitution, and your ancestors had to fight for it, fight tremendously. And they've had to fight every generation since the 1950s, because the churches have bowed out of the picture, which is why I did my movie, and I hope you'll see it, Enemies Within the Church, about the Marxist infiltration of even the evangelical churches now. We have been a country adrift. And as the churches have abandoned leadership, our families have fallen into disrepair, and our civil government has got way out of control, and we've been infiltrated by our enemies. Deeply, deeply infiltrated. So now we have to clean it up. And we're only going to do that through courageous leadership, loud leadership, bold leadership, and people backing them. Now, where does courage come from, folks, if not from faith? Where does you look when when your fathers and uncles and grandfathers were sitting on landing barges just off Omaha Beach, ready to charge Nazi machine guns. What do you think they were thinking about, people? You think they're thinking about girls and baseball? Or do you think there might have been a lot of praying going on? They were praying to summon the courage that they needed to do the job they knew they had to do. Well, that is where we are today. We're going to win this by the grassroots Americans, the grassroots people of faith, getting out of this cowardly, gutless Christianity that is so endemic now, and actually standing up boldly and in faith. Because if enough people stand up, that proves to God that people believe in Him. Faith is proof of courage, is proof of faith. You can say, I believe, I believe, I believe, all you like. But until you're willing to put your fortune on the line, or your reputation on the line, or commit your time, or sacrifice, it really doesn't prove much. This is where we are, folks. I think we're free today because your fathers and grandfathers put on uniforms and fought horrible enemies for years at a time. And your mothers and aunts and grandmothers worked 16 hours a day on the farm or in the ammunition factory so that your men could fight. Do we owe it? Do we owe it to those men and women to make the sacrifices necessary to save this great country? And do we owe it? Do we have an obligation to our children and our grandchildren who are coming after us to make the sacrifices necessary to preserve the liberty that they should enjoy? Is that our obligation? So I say we're in dire straits, but the greatest victories come from the darkest times, because that's when people start to look for a spiritual foundation, and that's when good people get off the darn fence and do what they always should have been doing. And we are in such a time right now. And everywhere I go around this country, I see millions of people, Moms for Liberty, new Republican groups, grassroots people getting involved because they sat at home for 2 years reading their kids' school textbooks, watching their cities burned, watching their elections stolen, and finally have woken up to the fact that we could actually lose the country this time. So I want to say we're in the middle of a communist takeover. It's only going to be pushed back with God's help if we stand up boldly and courageously and say it like it is. All of us, every one of us must stand up here. No more holidays for the next year, folks. We got to stand up, because I tell you what, we're all going to face judgment one day. And I would rather stand up and say, I did my best to save America, rather than saying I had the best golf score in Orange County. You know, this is the time. We got to do it for our kids, do it for our God, do it for our country. There's no choice now. That's where we are. So I want to say thank you, ladies, for listening. I'm all up for questions, challenges, criticisms, anything you have. Just lay it on me.
Trevor, thank you so much. That was frightening, um, frustrating, but also I think we all
Hi,
need a
Rosie.
slap upside the head and a wake up call, because
Mm.
being that we here listening to tonight are all active Republican women, um, we realize we have a fight on our hands, but sometimes I think even we lose sight of the scope of how big this fight is.
Yeah,
So
it's sort of worse than we think, but and it's bigger than we think, but it's better than we think, because there's so many people waking up now, and God is on our side. If we will do our part, He will do His part.
that that just hearing that is comforting, and but we can't just throw our hands up and say, oh, God will fix it. You're right, we have to do
No.
our part, absolutely.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask the first question or two, and to our guests that are here tonight, our viewers, please enter any questions you may have in the chat box. Again, that chat box you can find it at the bottom of your screen, and type in your questions. So the first question that I have for you, is, who in the Republican Party do you see as our strongest leaders that really have what it takes to help us fight all of this? Do you have some specific people?
Well, obviously, right now there's Trump and people around him, but there's also DeSantis, who is getting attacked by a lot of the Trump people very unjustly, I think. Um, we got to have Plan B here because we don't know what's going to happen to Trump. We just don't know. And so we got that. We got Josh Hawley, who's quite a very strong figure in the Senate. We got Ron Johnson, who's excellent. We've got people like Chip Roy in the House, and I really admire, I got to say, the 20 who held Kevin McCarthy to account. They got a bit of flack for that, but here's what they won. They won no more omnibus bills, where they just hide every bit of pork you can imagine, and B, the Speaker can no longer put money into primaries. Because what they were doing all the time, the Speaker would put money into get along Republican candidates and never into conservative candidates. So those two things are gone. And Mike Johnson, as Speaker of the House, I think is great. I think he's going to be a great leader. I would say I think we've got about 8 or 10 in the Senate who are really worth their salt, and about 20 in the House that are worth their salt. And about a third of them wouldn't know how to tie their shoelaces, and a few of them are really working for the other team. And that's Mitt Romney and Lisa Murkowski, and obviously, the man from Kentucky who's married to a Chinese agent, Elaine Chao. Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell, right?
Yeah.
No.
He should not be allowed in the Senate. He is. They've got to do in the Senate what they did in the House to clean this out.
Okay. We do have somebody asking about your movie, The Enemy Within, the movie that you mentioned. Where is that available?
Yeah, look. All my books and movies, you can go to Amazon, but if you go to trevorloudon.com, and then you can get signed copies. And this is the time where I'm selling tons because it's Christmas and people buy them for their friends and their relatives, and they buy them so they can read over the holiday period. So, yeah, go to trevorloudon.com. You can order White House Reds. You can order the House Un-Americans series. You can order the Security Risk Senators series. And each book is 400 pages with lots of footnotes and lots of illustrations. Very simple to read. So very clear. And also, enemies within the church. Everybody who cares about their faith has to watch that. It's full of whistleblowers, and I'll say we criticize a lot of prominent church people in that movie, but every single one of them we approached to come on camera and give their side of the story, to give a rebuttal, and not one of them took it up.
Janet, do you want to go with a couple of questions?
Yeah, I'm so glad you went first, Gretchen, because it was so powerful for me. I could barely move. But that's how wonderful it is to hear Trevor, because nobody speaks with the force and the passion and backs it up with all the details and history that he does. He knows the names and what they're doing and who we should watch out for. So I just have one thing that I'm wondering about, Trevor. You were saying we are so infiltrated, and obviously we are so infiltrated. What was the decade where this was allowed to come forward? Who was the president? Who was in charge? Why did we all of a sudden, it seems it wasn't all of a sudden, but I want to know what the pivotal time was when all this began to happen.
Well, look, it started in the 20s. It really got going in the 40s under Roosevelt. It was pushed back in the 50s under Eisenhower with the McCarthy era and that. It's got a little bit of energy under Johnson, and again under Carter. But the big push was Obama. the massive push was Obama. That's when he fired the good generals and replaced them with woke generals. That's when he put thousands of people into the bureaucracy, into the Justice Department, that's when the Chinese really got a foothold in this country. It was under Obama. He was our first, well, no, Bill Clinton had his moments, but he was our first real communist president. And people do not understand how much damage he did to our military, how much damage he did to education. But the real damage he did was putting thousands of communists into our bureaucracy. That was the real damage, Obama.
Do you think, I'm sorry, Gretchen, I'm just going to put a part 2 on this.
Oh, that's
How
okay.
much do
You're the
you
president. You can do what you want.
How much do you blame on the media? Because you said, and this was not allowed to be followed up on, and we weren't allowed to hear. How much?
Well, a huge amount. Look, before World War II, American journalists were trained on the job as cadets. You know, you work for a local paper, you cover the court cases and the county fairs and the local scandals, and you're a normal American. But after World War II, they started to train the journalists on the GI Bill in the journalism schools, which they set up. And you have people like Curtis McDougal, the Marxist, the communist, who invented advocacy journalism. Before journalists reported the news, advocacy journalism means you shape the news to educate the people in the right way. Now, 80% of American journalists identify as liberals, and the other 20% are either neutral or they might be conservative, but are so intimidated by the 80% and so denied a voice that it almost might as well be 100%. If it wasn't for the Breitbarts of the world, if it wasn't for the internet, which they're busily shutting down, we would be completely brainwashed by now. The media in this country is completely to the left, as it is in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, whatever. They took over the journalism schools just like they took the teachers' colleges over after World War II. The journalism schools were a huge target for the communists.
Oh, okay, Gretchen.
All right. Okay. We have a question. What specific things can we as individuals and within our organizations do at the grassroots level? It's getting, especially here in California, it is getting harder day by day to feel like we have any rights left, especially when it comes to anything involving elections. So what's your take on the best, most effective things we can do?
Well, look, California won the election for Trump in 2020. You know, Malcolm McGough and others, and it's horrible for me to say nice things about an Australian, but, he did a great job. And the election integrity people, they had 100,000 people in California on the phone banks, and they were having 10,000 any one night. And 5 weeks before the election, all those people were told to focus on Florida, North Carolina, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and one other state. And they won them all from California. So you got a massive base here. So it's a matter of being intelligent. Don't waste your time on unwinnable races. Focus your resources on those state house races you can win. And and volunteer to be part of the campaign for phone banking, etc. But here's another bit of advice I think that the California Republican Party needs to heed. The Republican Party generally needs to heed. Republican Party, especially in California, does not want to touch social issues. They will explicitly tell you, keep it about the economy, keep it about money, taxes, regulation. And I support all of that. But here's the thing. You got a massive Latino population and quite a large Black population and a huge Asian population in California. They are more socially conservative than the Anglo population. So why are we not a social conservative party? Do you think the young Black woman in South LA is more worried about balancing the state budget or having a cop in her neighborhood keeping the gangs away from her kids. You look at the most of these people. Like, I had an Uber driver the other day, a Muslim Uber driver in Sacramento. First thing he said to me was, "What do you think of this transgender stuff in schools?" You know, if we got to be talking the social issues, because you got a massive Christian base in California that isn't active. You got a massive Latino, Black, and Asian base that is socially conservative as you can believe. They want an education for their kids. They want the darn borders closed so their kids can get good jobs. They want the perverts out of the schools. The social issues are what stir people's hearts. It is issues of God and country and kids that fire people up. If I wanted to win back California, I would be emphasizing the social issues, because those people, they may vote Democrat, they may be fiscally liberal, but they are socially conservative and getting more conservative every day when they see how bad things are getting. So if the Republican Party is telling you not to focus on the social issues and you got a good candidate, I would tell them the opposite. 100% the opposite.
Wow.
Okay, that's a great answer. And I'll just throw in too that for those people, and most of our ladies are aware of this, but maybe you have friends that aren't involved in the clubs and stuff. Pay attention to what your central committees are doing too, because they're largely directing, if they're directing your attention to the candidates they think will win, and you need to get vocal with them and make sure they're picking the candidates that you want to win,
Yeah,
not just
look,
who they want to direct you to win. So
yeah, look, I agree. We get the candidates we deserve, but I just saw somebody wanted to mention election integrity, and I'd like to say something on that if I could.
sure.
The Republican Party will tell us, no, we don't want to talk about that. Move, that's old, that's 2020. We've got to move on. And I'm not even arguing whether the machines, whether there was fraud, and I know there was massive fraud. I know, and the Chinese had voter registration groups operating on American soil that were, doing massive stuff. But here's my argument that you say to the Republican leadership: this is a civil rights issue. You'll go out and knock on a door and you'll find some veteran and he'll have American flags all over the place. And you'll say, I got this great school board candidate. She's going to get the perverts out of the school. She's going to face down the unions. She's going to restore the curriculum. Will you come and vote for her? And he'll say, do you still have those election machines in this county? And you'll say, well, yes, we do. And he says, well, I don't trust them. I'm going to go fishing that day. 5 to 10% of our base does not trust them ever. So they're not going to vote. This is a disenfranchisement issue. We are going to be handicapped every election going forward by 5 to 10% because our base will stay home because they don't trust the machines. Until we make that argument and tell our Republican leaders we want real ID, we want paper ballots, we're going to handicap ourselves going forwards. Am I wrong on this? Anybody think I'm wrong on this?
You're right, but the state just made it that much harder to get rid of
Yeah,
these machines.
I know, because of what happened in Shasta County. I know.
Right.
But you haven't even got the Republican Party fighting for it here.
Right.
The argument you got to make is forget about the machines, whether the election was stolen. That's, there are people working on that, and so they should. The issue going forward is there is a massive lack of trust in elections now. How can we restore that trust? We have to have methods that people trust, and that's voter IDs and paper ballots like we had for 200 years. It's not an issue of whether the machines are fraudulent or not. It's the issue that people don't trust them. And you tell me if the Republicans can argue that one against you.
Well, it seems to me the only response to that is like you just said, we do have people looking into that, and they are starting to find things and come up with some new developments in Arizona and stuff. But in the meantime, if you say you're going to go fishing that day because you don't trust the machines, there's 10 Democrats that will be voting.
The
So,
Democrats are confident. They're not gonna they're
right.
fine with
So,
elections because they know the cheating benefits them. Look, we
but we
lost those
still have
2
to show
Senate
up.
races in Georgia. We lost. Mitch McConnell came into Georgia and said, "We lost because of Trump. We lost because Mitch McConnell wouldn't fight for the election. So tens of thousands of Georgia Republicans said, to heck with you. I'll teach you a lesson. We're not going to vote this time either." And that has cost us trillions of dollars. That losing those 2 Senate seats has cost us trillions. So the argument is we don't have time to waste. We have to restore confidence in the election, because if we don't restore confidence, either we lose the country or people start resorting to violence.
Right.
That is the argument to make.
How do we do that then in the short time frame that we have before the next election? Trevor, in California, how can we implement those important things that you said?
Well, you have to start making that argument very, very quickly. You start writing letters to the Republican hierarchy. You got to make the point: we are losing our base because of this issue.
Yeah, yes.
How are you going to address it?
Right, right.
They
I've
will have no answer other than, "Wow, yes, you're right."
All right.
And raise it here so that other states that can do something lead by your example. If the issue is raised here in California, even if you can't do much practically, raise it, make that argument, tweet about it, because that argument will spread around the country to other states that can still do something about it. Why did we get a red wave in Florida? Nobody else did. Because Ron DeSantis has shut down the ballot boxes. He's prosecuted several vote fraud rings. He's got an election integrity unit in Florida. We got a red wave in Florida because election fraud is illegal in Florida, and they actually prosecute it. He hasn't done nearly enough, in my opinion, but he's done more than anyone else.
It
Right.
certainly has.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to another question because all these people are
Someone had a
patiently waiting.
hand up. I didn't know if Karen
Yeah,
saw.
would have been Karen there.
Let me
I did
go.
see Gabriella Litoff had her hand up, but I asked her to put it in the chat, and then
Thank
it looks
you.
like she's possibly left the group.
Okay, well, we
Gabriella,
did
are you
ask.
still there?
Dale Kwasny had a question and she put it into the chat, and it's more of a comment, and it kind of goes along with what we were just talking about.
I have a question.
Hold on, everybody.
Yeah.
Janet and I are going to read these questions, and we will get to all of them. And I appreciate your patience. I know everybody gets anxious, so let's get on with these questions. So I'm going to take this one from. It says California is the largest manufacturer grower of marijuana in the world now, providing billions of dollars in cash to the marijuana industry, and that is being infused into our political system to grease the palms of the Democrats. And I don't know what DSA is, but so how can this be stopped?
Democratic Socialist America,
Socialist
the
of
largest
America. Okay,
Marxist
great.
group in the country.
How can that be stopped? Any
Yeah,
thoughts
look,
on that?
if I wasn't campaigning against communists, I'd be campaigning against marijuana. That is a massive threat to the national security of this country in all sorts of ways. That with the damage it's doing to our kids' minds and capabilities, the damage it's doing to education, and the money it's providing to the left. And I don't see anybody in the Republican Party actually getting up and saying we must reverse this trend of legalization of marijuana. See, that is an issue that I think would actually resonate amongst a lot of California Christians and conservatives. But even a lot of the Republicans are in bed with the marijuana industry now, unfortunately. So that's got to come from the conservative base. It's got to be made an issue again that we've seen the results of legalization in places like Colorado and Oregon. You know, Oregon, they're legalizing everything there. And what's it doing to their kids? This is a lack of courage in standing up against the drug industry. And we've got to start talking about it. We've got to start putting remits to conferences. We've got to start bringing it up. You know, how do we get rid of the marijuana industry in our state? What do we have to do it? It should be actually an issue being brought up at conferences and things, because that will encourage other people to do it around the country. This isn't going to be an easy task, but we have to start doing it, because if we don't clean up the drug thing, our youth is lost.
We're gone.
Country's lost.
Could I ask the last one right here from me anyway, Gretchen? You can go back to
Sure,
the chat.
sure.
It looks to us as though the Democratic Party is in shambles. They don't have a candidate that they can run for a second term who's even got a mind, or a vice president. This should be a cakewalk for us. It should be. Then, of course, there's Gavin Newsom, who is sitting there salivating for the White House.
Mhm.
What is your thought about the future for the Democrats right now? Their convention isn't that far away.
Yeah, see, they have big issues, because the same communists who gave you Obama also gave you Kamala Harris. She was supposed to be the candidate, but she was so unpopular, they had to use Joe to get rid of Bernie, and then they put Kamala in through the back door, and and so they really hurt themselves, because nobody likes Kamala, and then Newsom is the only logical candidate they have, and he's pretty unpopular. He's not exactly Mr. Wonderful either. So they're in a big trouble. But this is the thing. What they're relying on, they're going to rely on the abortion issue, and they're going to rely on the massive voter registration and get out the vote operations that are working all over this country, organized by pro-Chinese communists. They stole the last election under our noses. So yes, they're in disarray, but they've got the illegals. As the illegals are a thing, they're going to let them vote. They got these big massive voter registration organizations. So they sort of think, well, we could run Donald Duck and we'll be fine, you know. That's their thinking. They're not actually that concerned who's at the top of the ticket, because that's not where they win elections now. They win them down ballot cheating, massive voter registration drives. You know, the way Stacey Abrams operates in Georgia, the way Andrew Gillum operated in Florida, that's how they win elections now. And we're still focused on this idiot in the White House. They don't really care.
Wow. Did you have one in the chat, Gretchen?
Yeah. Malone Becker put in a question, but I think he's already answered this. The question was, should we be fighting election integrity first? She just submitted a public records request to LA County to get voter rolls. That is something that people can do.
I think we must continue, but we must make the effort to force Republicans to address it, and force President Trump and Ron DeSantis to address it. This is a disenfranchisement issue. The left are always going on about, we're trying to stop black people voting. We're trying to stop, Latinos, and they're getting redistricting done through this argument, and stopping our electoral maps through this argument. Well, we got to make the argument that our base is not voting because they do not trust. And this trust issue has been deliberately fostered by the left.
You made a comment earlier about how we need to not be cowards and not be afraid to address the difficult issues. One of our board members, Valerie Evans, sent me a message, and she said she couldn't help remembering that last night she was at a meeting where they were told to stay away from the trans issue. I'm on a central committee here in Orange County, And it was said at a meeting last night to stay away from abortion and go with other focus on the trans issue, because that's an easier one to get people on your side, whereas abortion is harder. So
Yeah, and I
it,
can.
it,
We can't
it's
back
like a
off
dog's
abortion.
breakfast.
Yeah, and we cannot back off. The trans issue should be a huge winning issue for us. You know, it should be. It is unpopular even on the left. You know, people do look. 24% of California kids are gender non-conforming. High school kids. Don't you think there are a lot of parents in California who are a little bit concerned about that? You know, this is the argument. This is why I say the Republican Party, that is a killer issue for us. If we would stand on that kind of thing, we're not going to allow this. We're not going to allow men to compete in women's sports ever. We're not going to allow people who are sexually confused to dictate policy to the rest of the population. You know, this is cowardice. Because a few transgenders might fly off the handle and throw their purse at you. What are they, you know?
Yeah, I know it.
And Ronna McDaniel thinks it's so brilliant when she could be attacking this issue to start a gay-friendly Republican club. Well, you know, she gets 7 gay votes across the country and burns off about 1 million conservative Christians. But, you know, that's logical.
How would you approach then, Trevor? Thank you for what you said about the transgender, and we feel about that. How do you feel Republicans should address the abortion issue? They have not agreed on a narrative.
I would say this. I got 2 adopted kids. I wrote an article when in New Zealand we have 17,000 abortions a year and 100 adoptions. I wrote an article called The Adoption Option, and I talked about how, see, the state controls adoption. And I wrote how we got our kids is we send out letters to churches and doctors and midwives asking for any women who were considering adoption. We could have adopted 7 kids. We got so many replies. We got to say we are suffering. We need to reduce abortion, because of the moral side of it, but also the massive shortage of babies for adoption. We need to free up the adoption bottleneck so that millions of infertile Americans, and there are millions of them, can finally get the kids that they want to get. You know, that's one angle for countering this, but we should not back down. We are pro-life from womb to tomb. We're pro-life, but adoption, reducing the restrictions on adoption so all the millions of people out there who want to adopt can actually do it, and there are babies, so you don't have to go to some third world country to adopt the kids that are out there. Make it an option. That's how I would play it.
I think that's wonderful. And there are far too many restrictions and hoops that they have to go through, that these young couples
Tens
get.
of thousands, you know, a relatively poor family that might be the best mum and dad you've ever seen. They might want to have 6 kids. They can't have any. And there are kids going around who have no dad. They have no decent family life. Adoption was always the way that illegitimate kids or unwanted children were dealt with, and it always balanced out. It always used to, but before abortion became common, there were enough babies to adopt, and some families would have 6 or 7 of them. But abortion came along. That's this figure in New Zealand: 17,000 adoptions a year, 17,000 abortions a year, 100 adoptions. Make that a big feature.
That's a very, very good point.
I heard just yesterday on some news thing that abortions have actually increased something like 20% since year over year, since Roe was overturned. The number of
Yeah,
abortions
it may
has
well be
actually
right too.
gone up. Yeah.
I think it was the
Um,
right thing to overturn it, but we've got to take the offensive, and we got to give good pro-life arguments. And I think adoption is a powerful argument.
That's wonderful. Yes.
Karen, are there people with hands still up? I'm sorry that they've had to wait.
No, I don't see any hands up at this point, but Gabriella, are you still on? You had your hand up for a while.
I did have, yeah, I'm still on.
Okay, thank you, Gabriella.
Yeah, sorry, I just, my computer is out of whack and I can't operate this, the chat on the phone very well. So
No
anyway,
worries.
yeah. I was, I was shocked by the amount of people that are with the Chinese Communist Party and are running this country. It just, it's terrible. But when these people run for election, don't their opponents have that kind of ammunition against them? Can't they say, look, this guy is or woman is in bed with the Chinese communists and so forth?
No,
Can't they bring that up?
look, Adam Schiff was
Yeah,
going, he was a perfect target because he was condemning Russia for condemning Trump for his imaginary Russian ties,
right.
working with the Chinese, working with the radical Muslims. Did one person call him out on that? Because
Exactly.
they didn't know. They didn't know. Look, ladies and gentlemen, you get those books, you'll be shocked.
Yes.
And what I can find out, you don't come to a foreign country and tell people that 40 of their senators and 100 of their congressmen are traitors if you don't have the evidence to back it up.
But why
But
don't their opponents
they
have that?
don't know. They don't know. They simply do not know. I talk to candidates all over the country who say, you're up against a hardcore communist. So how do you know that? I don't, they have no idea. People don't know Judy Chu's background. They don't know Jimmy Gomez's background. They don't know Katie Porter's communist background. They don't know Barbara Lee and Nancy Pelosi's communist background or Zoe Lofgren. They don't know because the
Maybe
media is not going to tell you and the FBI won't tell you. But I'd like, if I can, to address, there's a way we can get rid of much of this infiltration, quite a simple way if we can get another conservative president. If I can
please.
give a couple of minutes on that.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
it's outlined in the back chapter of Security Risk Senators Part 2. I outlay this. This has got to be the way to get rid of the traitors is very simple. You got to treat it like organized crime. And I'll give an example. Before World War II, there was the Purple Gang. It was the Murder Inc. And they were killing people all over America, and nobody would testify against them because they'd shoot you. And they had so many cops on the payroll that they could kill anybody. Nobody could do anything. So they brought in a Republican prosecutor from New York called Thomas Dewey. And he interviewed personally 1,200 young men to form a little untouchable unit, the best and the bravest. And then they went after Murder Inc. And they'd arrest a couple of low-level guys and they'd offer them the deal. You get 5 years jail, or we give you witness protection and you rat on all of your friends. And they started ratting. And it went right up the chain. They put the leaders of Murder Inc. on the electric chair, and in 2 years it was gone. It was over. Well, this is what you have to do. And you do this with vote fraud too. But the president would have to form a new intelligence agency. You might interview 30,000 people to get 1,000. Absolute best of the best people from special forces, police forces, IRS, maybe one or two guys from the old CIA before Obama, maybe one or two. And then you declare a 3-month amnesty in America for all foreign agents and all American traitors. You've got 3 months to come forward to this new agency and spill your guts. You tell us everything you know, who you worked for, who paid you, how you got compromised, who you paid. You've got 3 months. If you are honest and tell us everything, you do not get prosecuted. You'll have to appear in court to testify, but your punishment is between you and God. At the end of 3 months, if you have lied to us or you haven't come forward or you haven't left the country, we're coming after you. And when we catch you, you're going to go to Leavenworth for 40 years. That would throw every single foreign network into complete chaos because the Iranian agent who was bribing a senator wouldn't know if the senator had taken the deal, and the senator wouldn't know if the Iranian had taken the deal. You'd have hundreds of thousands of Chinese would leave the country. Russian mafia cartel guys. You'd see a whole bunch of big tech guys stand down. A whole bunch of Wall Street guys would leave their jobs. A whole bunch of senators would stand down for family reasons. You'd have a whole raft of people coming forward to testify, and all these foreign networks would just melt down. You could clean out all of the traitors within a couple of years. You wouldn't have to prosecute more than a few hundred, and you would have the biggest clean out in American history without firing a single shot, by using organized crime techniques. That could be done so simply with the political will.
Trevor, I just want to say, and then I'll let you get right in, Gretchen. I am picturing an Elliot Ness, and I am picturing that when President Trump wins, he appoints you as our Elliot Ness. Okay?
Well, I'll happily do it, but it's probably more competent people. But
No,
yeah,
I
look,
don't think so.
this is what you do. Look, this is how Giuliani took on the mafia families. They catch low-level guys and say, you get 30 years or you rat. And they rat it.
I love it.
It's a Christian way of doing it, because
Of
a
course.
lot of people get into treason. They get compromised. They get caught in bed with someone they shouldn't have been in bed with. They get in a business deal they didn't understand. They get drawn into a web they can't get out of. Give them a way out. Let them make their peace with the American people. Let them repent and apologize, and their punishment is between them and God. But the ones who will not repent, the ones who will not come forward, they deserve everything they get.
Right.
That is justice.
So I'm picturing that our women buying your books and learning who these people are and what their backgrounds are, and sharing that information with our local candidates and our maybe our central committees.
Absolutely.
And but how, I mean, we're not law enforcement, and we're not most of us aren't connected in the right way, but
We talk.
we may know people
Share.
who are. And
Yeah.
if we
You-
made it a mission of ours, and it doesn't have to be just in this election year, because this is something that's going to take some time, but everybody wants to know, what can we do? What can we do? What
Yeah.
can we do at our grassroots
Well,
level? This
I
is
love
something simple
This
we
is
could
fun.
do.
Yeah.
Dust
Yeah, well,
up,
look,
girls.
yeah.
He gave us number 2. Get these books, folks.
Yeah, look, yeah, just trevorloudon.com,
And we'll
but
be
look,
calling Trevor
it's-
weekly for
updates.
organizational
Yeah.
leadership.
But that's right. If you're in a war, the first thing you need to know is your enemy.
Yes.
And you have candidates going up against Judy Chu who have no idea what she's about. You have candidates going against Adam Schiff, who could be hammering him on his Chinese ties and never mention it because they don't know. Brad Sherman, you expose his ties. Jared Huffman, Raul Ruiz, who has extensive communist ties and corrupt ties. So you've got to have the information. You cannot win. Look, you imagine fighting the Nazis in World War II if we didn't even call them Nazis for a start, and we didn't know what motivated them, and we didn't know how they're organized or who they were allied to. How would you do that? We're fighting a war in America for the saving America. A lot of our leaders are traitors. We have to be able to call them out. We cannot win if we don't call them out. How can we possibly? You don't win a battle against crime if you won't even name the criminals, if you don't know who they're allied to, who they work with. It's the first thing the FBI does. They do maps. Who is who works with who, which businesses he control, what businesses he control, where's his money coming from. Then they find the vulnerabilities and they catch a couple of low-level rats. Then they take them down. That's how you do it. And that's how we must do it politically, because we are in these people, the Democrats are criminals.
Oh,
They
yeah.
Does
look,
our FBI
look,
care?
Well, our FBI is compromised, so that's why we got to start a new intelligence agency.
Right.
But the FBI weaponized, sold guns to the Mexican cartels, the Fast and Furious scandal.
Right.
They set the IRS on the Tea Party totally illegally. Then they weaponized the Justice Department and the FBI against a sitting president. But they would never commit vote fraud. Are you kidding me? That's all they do. That's what they do. That's how they win. I had a friend who worked for Nancy Pelosi for years. He was a commie and he's okay now. But they used to go and register people in her district. And if they thought the person was a Republican, they threw the ballot away. That's just standard. That's just what they do. They have a different set of morality than we do. We believe in fair play, honesty. They believe in winning at all costs.
Right.
They don't care how they win.
Okay, wow, you have given us a lot of extra time. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for
Well, you
that.
might as well. I enjoy this. It's great.
Wow.
We might have a little impetus for a project here. It's kind of rattling around in all of that empty space in my head. So don't be surprised if you hear from us again.
It's always a pleasure. Like I love California. You got a lot of patriots in California. We just need the better leadership and stronger to fight.
We
And,
need steel in our spines, Trevor. And
yes,
that's the problem.
we do.
We've had Jello spines and it's showing up all over the place.
We've been too nice for too long.
Yes.
And we've been taken advantage of. And if
We're
we
afraid
care
to be
about our
called
kids,
names.
if those who will not defend their own family are worse than infidels. We got to stand up for our kids here. And if that gets a bit uncomfortable sometimes and we get a bit tough on people, well, Jesus was perfectly happy he didn't negotiate a peaceful settlement with the money changers, did he?
No.
He
Not
just
at
went
all.
right in there and he threw them tables over because that was the appropriate thing to do at the time.
Well, thank you so very much. I'm going to turn this back over to Janet to say the final thank yous, but this just could
I'm
not
seeing,
have been more interesting. I kind of hate for it to end.
so do I. I'm ready to go to midnight. But thank you, Gretchen and Trevor. It's just been riveting. I think that is the word I used. You've been saying a lot of the things many of us just suspected or maybe whispered, but now we should say it out loud and make sure we have power behind our principles, because we kind of compromised our principles. We've compromised our values, and here we are.
Just think when you're going to make a decision, just think, I'm going to be accountable one day. And courage is proof of faith. And if I really believe what I say I believe, I shouldn't be scared of the school board or the county commissioner, or I shouldn't be afraid of that. There's bigger things to be afraid of, right?
That's right. Well, now staring us in the face.
Yeah.
Sherry, could I ask you something, Miss Webmaster? People are going to be wanting to see this because it's being recorded. What do you say about when it might be available? Because I know that's going to be a big question.
I would say within the week.
Wonderful, wonderful. So
it'll be on the website.
Wonderful. And I like the way you're thinking, Gretchen. Keep those thoughts going around the head, and I'm on board with them. We've got to get many more Zooms like this that are just full of such important information. This is the real meat and potatoes of what's happening now. And I agree with what Trevor said, and I'm sure we all do. We have been saying, oh, this is the last election. This is the most important election. No, now we really, really mean it. This is where the rubber meets the road. This one in 2024. And I'm excited about what you said about Elliot Ness.
Yeah. It's been done before,
Love it.
It's those courageous people, how much sacrifice and how many brave people have have laid down their lives and risked their lives and made sacrifices to give us what we have. You know, we owe it to them.
That's
We
right.
owe it to them, and we owe it to our kids.
We do. And I'm sorry, Gretchen, were you talking? Somebody else was talking right now. That wasn't you, Gretchen? Okay.
Nope.
I'm just going to say this is a wonderful way to end this series. And the week of Thanksgiving, let's keep in mind everything that Trevor told us about all the things that we have to be grateful for in this country. And that's why we're being attacked, because we have so much to be grateful for. And I believe this is a spiritual warfare. I believe this is truth versus lies, and this is God versus Satan. And we know who wins because we've read the end of the book. So we will go with that. And I want everybody to have a blessed Thanksgiving. I am just so fired up now. I'm going to eat 2 turkey legs.
Good for you. Good for
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Bless you for all you do, Trevor.
Well, thanks very much, lady. It was a real pleasure. No doubt we'll see you again. And
Yes.
yeah, thank you so much. Have a great Thanksgiving and a great
Need your
Christmas.
wisdom.
too.
And yes.
Just
too.
get ready for the big year. Get
Yes.
organized for the big year.
All
All
right.
right. Thank you.
Wishing everybody a wonderful, wonderful